remember December 7, 1941 very well too, because on it's Sunday morning, we were going to Sunday school, and at that time my mom and Dad had us going to this church with Arthur Kong. He was the postmaster, he was the pastor, and then it was a Mormon church, reorganized Latter-day Saints, and there were about 5 or 6 families, and all the kids came to Sunday school. And that morning, I was a little early, so I was down at the park playing with some kids, waiting for Sunday school to open. And then I remember seeing all these people running around. I said, what's going on? You know, people were running from one, and they were picking up their kids. They came to the park and said, let's go. And then I saw my sister come in and said, Dad wants us to go home, let's go home. And when we went home, Father had the radio on, Pearl Harbor was being bombed. I remember that very distinctly. Playing at the park with some other kids, and then seeing the mothers and dads running to the park to get the kids. And I said, why did everybody have to go home? And then my sister came down and fetched me and said, we gotta go home. We're not going to church. And there, my father was and he was almost tears in his eyes when he was hearing the broadcast about Pearl Harbor being bombed, December 7, 1941. And so I was, 6 years old. I remember that very well. And I remember very well during World War II. During World War II, the sugar mill was like on a mission to make as much sugar as they can. And I remember there was a huge poster on the side of the mill that gave how much tonnage they produced. And you know, you could see the color going up, and the higher the color, the more sugar they made. And actually, you know, because of World War II, I saw my dad reading the paper, Hilo Tribune Herald, and it would tell him exactly what was going on, and he would tell us a little bit. And then I said, well, if I can read it, I don't have to wait for my dad. And I was in first grade, second grade. So I learned how to read. And I would go home and say, okay, what's going on in the war? And I could read it. And the war motivated me to learn how to read, so I could read the newspaper and see what was going on. And you know, the Battle of Guadalcanal and Midway, I mean, huge headlines. And that's what helped me to read, was just to learn what was going on during the war. And then I remember, after the Battle of Guadalcanal and Bougainvillea, and the Marines, and they were successful in the South Pacific, 2 divisions of Marine camped right out here in Waimea. 2 divisions. The 5th, and I don't know what division. Now these were the guys who fought at Guadalcanal. They came up here to recuperate, to build themselves up again, and they used all our beaches as places to practice landing crafts. So the beaches were kind of taken over by the military. All the Hapuna, Kauai was all used for Marines. And with thousands of Marines going around, you know, on weekends they had nothing to do. And I remember they'd come down to Kohala. We only had that coffee shop and the theater, but they would jump on the trucks from Waimea to go to Kohala just to watch the movie because we had this big, beautiful theater. And it was time for us to earn a few bucks. So I made, and not me, a whole bunch of us kids made little shoe shine boxes so we could shine the shoes of these Marines and make a few bucks, you know. And then we went around the Filipino camp, and anybody who had shoes to shine, we shined them. But it came about because of the war. And these guys who could polish their shoes. And then there was these occasions when the Marines would come down and pass my house and go down camp and went all the way down to the lighthouse where they built a shooting range. And I believe that shooting range was there for the Marines to practice the windage, the gauges, because it was very windy. The wind came from this direction, and they shot in this direction, and they had to adjust the windage on the rifles. And I believe that's why that rifle range was built, and they had targets. And whenever we saw the trucks going down there, we knew that was our entertainment for the day, was to follow the trucks, go down there, and watch the Marines shooting their rifles. And the first time I saw huge rifles and machine guns, and nothing bigger than that. And M1s and carbines, BARs and light machine guns shooting. And the best part of the day, Lucas, was lunch, because they had boxes of C rations and K rations. They came in little boxes, and they would toss them to everybody. And so, you know, we'd grab these K rations, and they were little boxes wrapped in wax, and you could open them up, and inside every one was 4 cigarettes, a little wad of toilet paper, a little P38 opener, and everybody, we call it P30, it was a can opener. Then there was a can with different kind of goodies, hamburger patties, I forget what else they had. And there was always a round piece of chocolate. And there was chiclets. There was chiclet gum, piece of chocolate, 4 cigarettes, toilet paper, and a can. And there was lunch. And there was candy. And there was cigarettes. I mean, it was a big deal to open up and eat with the U.S. Marines. Well, they're firing. Okay, lunchtime, and hey, kids, help yourself. It was, and then I remember in 1943, they were ordered, I guess, to ship out. And word got around Kohala that they were dumping everything they had. They were dumping everything they had. And even prior to that, some of my friends and who had connections with the Marines and so forth, they got pup tents. They had little knapsacks. They had canteens. And so the word went around that they were dumping all this stuff. And the dump was just above Harvey Hill. So I remember very well that morning I was at a coffee shop, and there were about 5 or 6 of us, and Gangster Sugata was one of them. And Gangster said, "Well, let's go up there and get our stuff, and let's go find it. It's right at top of Harvey." And Harvey was only like 4 miles away, you know. Here's Halaula, Kapahau, and then Harvey. Well, Kapahau, Honamakau, then Harvey. We could walk it easily. And so, barefoot, shorts, t-shirt, we say, we're gonna go to the marine dump and pick up all the camping equipment, everything we can get. And they were dumping it because these are the same Marines who attacked Iwo Jima, Mount Suribachi. And so they were ready to go. They were on the way to invading Japan. And they left the training area here. But our thought was, we gotta go up there. And I was about 10 years old. And so 4 of us left. We went to Kohala, and we met some friends. So there were about 6 of us, and we went to Harvey. And then we said, well, right up the road is the dump. Let's go. So we started walking up Harvey Hill. We went 2 miles, top of Harvey Hill, no dump. So we said, well, it must be right around the corner. We walked another 2, 3 miles, no dump. Now we're on a mountain road, no dump. And we said, they gotta be, because we saw these guys coming back. They had military stuff. So it gotta be true. This dump is here. And all we gotta do is find it. And so we walked. And we walked. Barefoot, no water, no food, thinking that that rubbish dump was just a few miles away. Well, guys, I measured we finally walked and kept on walking on that mountain road that you just drove over. And we finally saw the dump. And I measured the distance from where the dump was at the top of the mountain road. There's a big pool there. They're digging out, you can see the pool where they're digging out some gravel, cinders, that big hole, and you drive right past it. And just below that is where they're dumping stuff. And this bulldozer was there, and he didn't move. And trucks of marine stuff was being dumped, but there must have been about 100 scavengers from all over the islands going in there and grabbing whatever they could. And we went down there and grabbed whatever we could. But what was amazing is years later I measured from that dump to where we started at the coffee shop, 24 miles. 24 miles is the longest walk I ever took in my life. And I was only 10 years old. But determined to get our goodies. Determined to get camping equipment, and we did. I got a whole knapsack and a canteen and some pop tents and stuff, because they were dumping. And then Santa Claus came on one of those trucks. And the guy that was driving the truck saw all us kids. And instead of going to the area to dump it, he stopped by the road. And he said, hey kids, come over here, come on. And evidently, that truck must have just taken everything out of the division's recreational facilities, because it was full of basketballs, baseballs, gloves, bats, all the stuff that the Marines use for playing sports, and they started dumping it on the road. And I said, all these baseball gloves coming? And I started grabbing my share. And I grabbed 2 gloves. Wow, I got a baseball gloves. And I tried to get bats. They were just dumping it. And I said, okay, so let me continue telling that story. And so we never told our parents. And now it was getting dark. Fortunately, the Marines saw all these scavengers up there, and they brought a water tank, a buffalo, a big water tank you could get water. And we had canteen cups. And we had boxes of sea ration. We had all the food you could eat. Boxes. They were just dumping. So we had food, we had water, and we had pop tents, and all our precious goodies. So we made our own little camp of tents, and we had food, and I don't know, we made a little fire, we stayed warm. And we said, okay, tomorrow we'll go home, for sure. We'll find one way or another to go home. And we're going to pack as much as we can to carry, and we're going to go home. So that night we were kind of bedding down, and then we all heard that magic sound. And one of the games we played in Kohala was to sit outside of the maintenance area that took care of the cane trucks, that took all the heavy equipment, and cane trucks were maintained, and that's where they got the gas. So we'd sit outside and listen to the sound of the trucks and guess, what truck is that? By the sound. And we could guess, oh, that's D27. No, I don't think, I think that's D40. There was D dash. And so, oh, that's D14. No, that's D17. And then the trucks would come in, and then we'd see who was right. So we knew the sound of trucks, plantation trucks. When that evening, when we were just about ready to go to bed, we heard a truck coming up the mountain. And we all knew just by the sound of that truck that it was the molasses truck. And it was going back to the plantation. We got a ride. That was our ride. And I remember everybody saying, the molasses truck, and we knew the driver. His name was Mr. Yonetta, and he lived right around the house from me. And so he knew who I was. And when that truck came up that mountain road, we all ran out and said, stop, 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 stop. And when he stopped and recognized us, I thought we were all going to get dirty lickings right there. What are you guys doing? He was so angry. And he looked at me and said, does your father know you're here? I said, does your dad, what are you guys doing here? Get on my truck. Now, I really admire his courage, because he had this huge tank on this flatbed and only handholds on the side. So we're hanging on the side of the tank, standing on a truck, and some of us snuck in the back between the tank and a cab so we could tuck ourselves in there and hang on. And because we were riding a truck, we couldn't take all our goodies. But guess what goodies I took for sure? Was my 2 gloves. And I took some other stuff, what I could carry. But we left the tents, we left the sea rations, everything was too heavy to carry. We left them all behind. But, you know, that experience, I don't know, when I think about, and I see my grandchildren when they're 10 years old, would I let them walk 24 miles, barefoot, without water? Nothing. And the reason we did that with nothing was because the dump we thought was just 2 miles away, 3 miles away, and then 4 miles, 5 miles, 6 miles, 7, and we kept walking. 24 miles one way. That was one hell of a, and that is the longest walk I ever took in my life, 10 years old. And when I see my little kids growing up, I say, oh my God, what was I doing when I was 10 years old? But you know, it was that kind of manna we had, that spirit of being free. We could roam, we could walk. We were confident, you know, that Wherever we wanted to go, we would go. Wherever we wanted to see, we would see. And we had no doubt in our minds that we're going to find that marine dump and get all our goodies, and we did, to a certain extent. I was sorry I had to leave so much behind because Mr. Uneda wasn't going to let us take anything else. He said, get on that truck. And I remember my dad, when I got home, and I thought, oh, here comes the dirty lickings now. But evidently the parents began talking about these missing boys, and they kind of figured that we had gone, that we would come back. They knew we would come back. And he was so happy to see me that night. It was dark, it was night already, and he just gave me a big hug and asked me where I went, and he said, I figured that's where you guys were. We kind of figured out what happened. And he was very happy to see me home. But I never got any lickings. And but it was an adventure.